Hi, and welcome to Celebration Bar Review. As I'm recording today, we are just under 50 days to the bar exam. And this is a very difficult time for a lot of bar students if you're within that less than 60-day range, particularly from about 40 days up to 60 days. We enter a period of time that for many people is very difficult, very hard to get a sense of. I call it the dreaded seventh week, but in effect, what happens is that for a lot of people, the exam now appears imminent. The problem is that even though it's an imminent exam, typically your performance is not yet passing. That's as it should be, but it doesn't feel right. And so there's this disconnect, this clashing between here's the test and here's where my abilities are, and they're not matching up very well. And so it creates a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. Now, if you're a bar retaker, this is even more pronounced. And so in this video, I want to talk about some current research that's going on that I think is very productive. I've used it with some students over the last couple of exams. I like it, and I wanted to share it with you in this video. I think it's a breakthrough that a lot of people could find particularly helpful in learning methodology and how to break through, particularly during this period of time, and that's why I'm suggesting it now. I think it's got the most value, though you could do it at any time. Essentially what we're looking at is dealing with what we would describe as post-traumatic stress syndrome. Now, that's an appropriate description, I think, for bar takers who've received a failing score, because in most cases, this will be the first time that you've ever failed at anything that was significant. And the methodology that I'm going to suggest was pioneered by a couple of social psychologists, James Pennebaker and Kurt Lewin. It's been described in a publication titled Redirect, The Surprising New Science of Psychological Change, written by Timothy D. Wilson. It's a very readable book. It's not too academic, and it goes into a great deal of detail. I'm not going to bore you with that, but the essence of the approach that Pennebaker and Lewin came up with is to avoid the traditional approach to post-traumatic stress disorder, which is called critical incident stress debriefing, CISD. That's the normal approach. And they replace it with something called story editing, which is what I would recommend. Now, why is it important to use story editing? Well, in my experience with those who experience failure on the bar exam, and as I said, it's usually the first time they've had a significant failure in their lives, certainly in their academic life. There are all of the normal symptoms of PTSD. Unfortunately, what happens is that often keeps those individuals from succeeding on later test administrations. In other words, the post-traumatic stress disorder becomes so big, so significant, that the bar taker just simply can't get past it when they come back to the exam. In fact, I had a student recently who said that it was so significant in their lives that they couldn't even say the word bar exam for a couple of years after they took the test and failed. So it can be pretty overwhelming. In any event, getting past that disorder is essential, I think, to maximizing your test performance, no matter how hard you study, how much law you know, whatever else you've done. Now, this idea of story editing essentially targets what we would describe as a long-standing personal narrative that people construct about themselves, and it provides a way to revise or restore that narrative into something more productive. And you might say, well, what difference does it make? Well, very often we create these narratives about ourselves based on the experiences. If you've seen some of my other videos, or if you're in my course, you know that we talk about this idea of external events which create internal realities or internal perceptions. We tend to take external events and we do this internal translation of the event so that the external event is, for example, I failed the bar. The internal representation is, I'm stupid. Now, that's not true. We could look at any other person objectively and say, oh, of course that's not true. But internally, this is part of what happens. So the use of meditation to begin to become aware of those choices, the use of counseling and psychology are certainly helpful. But one of the easiest things you can do is story editing to change your narrative. In other words, to change the internal representation. Now, I am not suggesting that you go and counsel with a psychologist. Story editing is self-directed. It's simple, it's fast, anybody can do it, it's pretty easy to do. So here's the instructions. This is only going to take you 4 days to do. Each night for the next 4 nights, and you got to do this right before you go to bed, sit down and either type or handwrite your story, in other words, what you're going to talk about what happened to you on the previous bar exam or exams that you failed. Now, this story that you write can be as long as you wish, with as much detail as you choose to put in it. No one else is going to read it or even know it exists unless you tell them. You need to write this until you feel that you've written out for that first night. In other words, you've said everything you want to say. Once you've done it, finish it, save it, and then go to bed. Now, it's important that you do it right before you go to bed because your brain needs the ability to process that narrative, and the best time to do that is while you're sleeping. If you're using holosync or meditation, I think it's great to do this story editing, then do your meditation as you go to bed and sleep. That's the ideal. All right. On night 2, so we've done night 1, here's night 2. Hello, night 2, yes. Start again with a new sheet of paper or a new computer file, if that's appropriate, and tell your story again. Do not review the night 1 story before you start to write. Just begin writing. Now, most likely this night 2 version will have some new or different details than the night 1 version. Write as long as you want again until you feel written out. Okay? Again, when you're done, go right to bed or do your meditation and go to bed. But finish and go to bed. Don't do this in the morning. Don't do it during the day. Do it at night before you're ready to go to bed. You don't review it. You don't do anything else. Now, you follow the same steps on night 3 and night 4. That is, for the next 2 nights after that, you sit down, you open up a new file, and you write whatever you want to write about those experiences, as much as you feel you need to write. Don't review the previous nights. Just do that night, then do your meditation or go right to bed. Don't review the prior stories from each night. Now, on the 5th night of this exercise, you pull out all 4 stories that you have written and read them to yourself. Read them in order, night 1, night 2, night 3, and night 4. Now, here's the interesting thing. Most likely, you're going to see some real significant changes from the first night to the last night's version. There is development in the story. There may be more detail, there may be more information, there may be more feeling. It's different for everybody. The point is you won't have written the same narrative 4 nights in a row, even though you're talking about the same set of events. But that's all you need to do is just read all 4 of those and then go to bed. Now, what's interesting is that the studies and the testing that Pennebaker and Lewin have done show that this simple 4-night exercise is enough to change the personal narrative from a negative, when you've got a post-traumatic stress situation, into a positive. What Wilson, the author of the book, calls moving from small edits to lasting changes. And I've really seen this work. It's an amazing phenomenon. You could use it with almost anything, but for our purposes, for the bar exam, it's very powerful. Now, I would suggest that you try this, and I would say if you're watching this video in that window of 40 to 60 days, it's absolutely the best time. But even if you're just a few days from the exam, go ahead and do it. It's helpful in any event. If you do it, I'd like you to simply let me know that you did the exercise so that I can start to track your results. I'm not particularly interested, and I've said this to my own students, I'm not interested in whether you subjectively think it helped you or not. Because unfortunately, according to the research, that's not a very good measure of the method. In other words, people say, well, nothing happened, I didn't see anything. But then, interestingly enough, they do overcome this traumatic event. And in our case, the traumatic event of the bar exam, what we want to see is that your performance on the exam improves, increases, and of course, ultimately that you pass. So the best way for us to evaluate the efficacy of the approach is simply to say that we know you did it and then let us know what your bar results are when they come in. Now, as I said at the beginning of this video, I have made this suggestion to some selected students over the last couple of exams as I've been reading the research. I was impressed and excited about it, and the results were good. And the students who followed the process actually found it was very helpful at the end, although they all said to me at the beginning, I didn't see that much difference. I didn't think a whole lot had happened, and yet I noticed that their behavior began to shift, that they really started to move towards a more confident and self-aware position. So I think it really makes a difference. So in any event, I'm going to suggest that you give this a try. It'll take you 4 nights to write, a 5th night to review. I believe it'll be really beneficial to you. And as you're going through this stress between where you want to be and where the exam is, I think you'll find it's a great stress reliever at this particular point in your studies. So I hope that's helpful to you. I'd love to get your feedback and hear about how you're doing. If you want to know more about it, as I say, you can go to Wilson's book The Surprising New Science of Psychological Change. It's a wonderful piece of writing and interesting stuff. And as always, we welcome your comments, and good luck to you as you embark on taking the bar, hopefully in just a couple of months. Thanks.